right, so we're starting 4 lines from the end of the top section, beginning of the mimer.
What page?
First page.
Kuf Yud,
The,
Kuf Yud, Yud,
Yud Zion.
Zion, yeah.
All right.
So this section is the revisiting what was discussed previously as an introduction to what follows to this next mimer. And specifically, what we are revisiting is the principle that there is two aspects in the oir that emanates, that comes from Atmos. There's the oir in Sof. Oir in Sof means an oir that does not represent any type of a message for external consumption and identification. Just as one does not understand what Etzem is, one cannot understand what this oil is, because this oil is fully represents what the Etzem. It's all oil in Sof. But inherent and included in this oil, ultimately surface, excuse me, sphirot, which are called sphirot agnuzos. Sphirot that are contained within their source. These sphirot, the intent and the meaning of these sphirot is not merely to reveal and to tell you to speak about the Etzem. Rather, it is aiming at identifying and ultimately enabling the creation of a world. The Oyer Ein Sof per se itself does not have any different parts, closer and further from the source. It represents the truth of the source in all its presence. The source, which is impossible really to really identify, only to point to in a manner why we can't understand it. And the simplest level is how the Rambam presents it, which is a first being, a being that is present without any precedent for its presence, is something which we cannot get, so to speak, wrap our minds around. What kind of presence is it that is not preceded by an intent for its being? The only way we can, so to speak, focus in on it, this is such a true being that its being itself completely justifies its presence. Does not need any other justification, explanation why it's there. Oh, thank you. Das mit Ein Sof. Motze Rishon. As the Rambam refers to it. Or Amitis Imotze. Other words in the Rambam. The truth of his presence. A presence that is a presence that presents a truth rather than some kind of a response of a situation. It is there because it is true, and therefore there's no way that justifies, that explains what its presence represents. That presence does not have world, the emanational world and the relational world at its core, so to speak, as its intent. This is not what it represents. It is for. World does not even have a place there, have a way to explain what world is. World is a created entity. World does not have that fundamental truth. This is a know that is fundamentally truth. Within that, that does not represent a world element. However, within that, included in that, internal to that, there's also a beginning and an approximation, a projection of world. But that is not the Ein Sof. This is that which is contained within the Ein Sof. This is called sphirot Hagnuzis. Sphirot Hagnuzis have already in them, within their definition, the union of eventually affecting the creation of world. And as the Rebbe explains it extremely briefly over here, that this oil, ultimately, in this oil there are different levels as spheres, ultimately to the point where this oil can be mislabish in kelim. At the point where this oil is mislabish in kelim, he becomes a Metzias Dover. And we discussed the principle of Metzias Dover. Ein Sof is not a Metzias Dover. Ein Sof does not call for an answer. What is this? Because it's Ein Sof. It is Amitis Imotze. We use the term it's self-justifying. Even that is incorrect, really. Because justifying entails that there is a question and there's an answer. In Ein Sof, there is not a question that you have to answer why it's there. In this Ein Sof, perhaps we could say, jumping the gun a little bit, that because it's Ein Sof, it includes the possibility of there being a created entity. This possibility means the facilitator, not the possibility. It is capable of anything, including creating a new entity. And that is what comes in the form of 10 spheres, because world at its inception has to have 10 spheres. In principle, the 10 spheres represent how it touches the source and how it ultimately develops in something on its own, a Metzias Dover, from Chochmah all the way down to Malchus. So we will start 4 lines from the end, just so we are inside. The line begins with Hislapshus B'Keli. Ultimately, this oir comes to the point where it's mislabish in keli. At that point, you could clearly identify different aspects in this oir. And when you become mislabish in kelim, then this becomes a metzius level. Aval ha'oir, at the end of the 4th line from the bottom. Aval ha'oir she'bechinas ein soif. But the oir that has the ein soif, a definition, aspect, ובבחינת בלי גבול, and that oil which is בבחינת בלי גבול, without boundary, הנה בשורשו ומקורו לפני הצמצום. As this oil is in its root and source before the tzimtzum, it is not it is not in order to inform, so to speak, and impact worlds. To tell worlds of this entity, the Hoyer. Rak, only one end is this so is sent for. It is in a manner, b'chinas gilui, its self-defining element is gilui min ha'etzem, a revelation from the Etzem. This in a revelation from the Etzem, that itself is already a marvelous thing. Why would the Etzem be Megala itself? Nonetheless, there is this oir where the Etzem chooses to be Megala itself. And this etzem, when this Megillah min etzem, it's Megala the etzem, from the etzem, it is totally imbued with etzem. This Gillah min etzem is such that just like the etzem, you don't have the question, what is it for, what does it stand for? Similarly, this oil represents the etzem. That's what Gillah min etzem. It reveals to you the truth of the Yetzer. Ve'alkein, and thus, ein boy his chalkus, b'vchinas mida v'shira b'yetzer. Therefore, in this oir, there is not the division of mida v'shira, of measure, of any kind of measure, of the beginning and end. Be'etzem means in its essence what it stands for. We'll learn the next line and then we will be able to go back to this. What does be'etzem mean over here? V'gam, and also, k'moi shemeir be'ilomeis, as this oil ultimately impacts the worlds, this oil does not engage in a hislapshus, in an imbuing manner, the ischalkus and subdivision to be able to fit into different contours of different situations. Does not have that. Rak only b'bchinas oir makif. The way this oir, even the way this oir manifests itself and impacts the world, it is b'bchinas oir makif. It is in a non-makif manner. Shemakif lekulam b'sholem, that it encompasses all of them, meaning all these different aspects that the oil is ultimately capable to identify are encompassed here equally. This b'shova is a very important point. B'shova means he does not give credence to chokhmah over bina or malchus. They all are equal from that perspective. Again, inevitably we ask ourselves the questions, how is it possible? What does that mean? So the mashal that we kind of identify, that gives us a means to approach this Indian, is that in the human being there are 613 different parts, both limbs and koiches. Amongst these is chokhmah, and then there is also malchus. That's in the oiris, and in the parts there's the brain and there's the toenail. The toenail, in comparison to the brain, it was of no consequence. And yet, a person who has a damage, a blemish in his toenail, is a blemished person. The Balmum, he is not permitted to do the Avedim B'Samigdash. The fact that we say that he is a blemished person should conjure up in our mind the concept: what is perfection? What is perfection on that level? From a practical perspective, from a worldly perspective, he's perfect. Obviously, this imperfection is due to a different perspective of the concept of perfection. In the world, perfection can be identified with functionality. One way or another, there's some kind of a functionality related aspect. Coming from a maki, from a higher viewpoint, perfection is way above the union from functionality. Perfection is that which it deserves to be, put in simple terms, deserves to be in the inner chambers of the king's palace. Looking for, so to speak, from a top-down view. That perfection is a king, so to speak. It is a derivative of the king's perfection. If a person would put a perfect plate in front of the king, or even in the cupboard of the king, but it has a little scratch, that would be an insult to the king. Just doesn't belong there. Doesn't fit in the spirit of that situation. So this perfection is rooted not after it's created, but on a conceptual level. A long time we were talking about, something, building a house or building a table, building something. So he conceptualizes this house. Let us, so to speak, open our imagination and say, let's say, if this house can actually emanate and come forth in full glory directly as it is conceptualized in the mind, without having to go through the further the definitions, the different parts and so forth, and utilizing different materials. It goes straight from the mind into existence. How perfect would it be? Beyond perfection. This is what he's saying over here. The oil in slave, the makif, that encompasses everything, does not relate to different madrigas, because he sees everything from this totality, from this perfection perspective. From perfection perspective, everything represents the real truth. And that's why it's makif lekulam b'shova. Everything, all the spheres, have an equal place and relationship and respect from the perspective of the oil makif. Because they're all representing the makif, the totality of the oil makif. The reason that there are all these four spheres is because the oil makif allows from them all, contains them all.
From this makif perspective, everything is representing the truth. There's no
Everything
hierarchy. There's no hierarchy.
There's no hierarchy. Right. Sorry,
That was a good question.
right. Like he said before, the very initial concept of a human being includes all 613 different parts. Not because they need it functionally, but because that's what the concept of a human being is. And therefore they're all of equal significance, and they're all perfect in themselves.
And the reason why they all become equal is because we're outside the realm of function and structure, but just that from that higher perspective, it's not even a composite. It's all. Why did we say 613 when seemingly from above it's all just one bria, right? That's why there's no hierarchy. Or am I missing it?
This concept of the human being, like we said just a moment ago, let's say you conceptualize of a house, and this concept materializes in actual fact straight from the concept. What would it look like? When you conceptualize a house, you do not, at the conceptualization level, identify different floors, basements and attics and rooms and different rooms, and nothing. You conceptualize a house. These things become surface after you focus in what is a house from a functional perspective. But in the concept of the house, you do not identify any of these things.
And that's why the slightest blemish on the coin makes him puzzle.
That's right.
And
because the conceptualization of his wholeness is not from a world perspective, that you make something perfect, but from a conceptualized level.
Okay, and then we're also saying once that initial concept shows up on the actuality level, it will have this dimension of 613. It'll turn out to be constituted of, even though it's not a composite, it's still somehow.
Just as we're saying that in this AYIN soif there is as a sphirot agnosis. Because the AYIN soif has ultimately the capability, quote unquote, AYIN soif, to the impact of the earth, that it can actually replicate itself outside and create something, a new entity.
And that's even though it has sort of no message for external consumption on the one hand.
That's right.
On the other hand, it has this ability, and that will by necessity take on these dimensions of 10.
That's right.
Okay.
Because that's how it. That's right. In order to have a perfect world, you have to have a dimension of 10.
There's a difference between a house and a man. Different people have different needs for there's different kinds of houses for different people.
Okay, I'm not going there. So this is what the Rebbe is concluding over here, that the AYIN soif itself is b'bchinas gila min ha'etz. All it stands for is gila min ha'etz. Etzem is is one. We don't even begin to understand what it is about and where it's coming from and why it's there. The question why it's there doesn't even apply. And that's why in this oil, which is representing this etzem, it's a gilumino etzem, there is not an identifiable a level, a instruction of levels. Even to the extent, these last lines are very important. The end of the second line from the bottom. Begam, and even, k'moi shemeir bo'elomis, even as this oil is meir bo'elomis, is impacting itself and shows itself in world. Not like the other oil that when it comes into world and goes into kelim, there is a mitzias dober. This oil, because we explained all the different aspects that will now enable us to understand it. Because this oil represents top-down view, not its resultant presence, but a top-down view of how it rooted in the source, in the etzem. Therefore, even as this oil ultimately is meir bo'elomis, it shows itself in world, it remains representing a top-down view. It is not b'chinas bhitlabshutum or yischalkus. It does not imbue itself in world, and does not have the union from yischalkus. Let me explain, if I may. I'll try. Yitlabshus. Ein b'chinas bhitlabshutum or yischalkus. If you create a table, and the table is, so to speak, a conceptualized table. It's a table on the level of conceptualization. It does not really stand on its own. Let's say you have a picture of a table. The picture of the table, has not really imbued itself into a table. And it does not provide the presence of a table. And yet it looks like a table. In what way is this a table when it does not begin to even come close to the surface of a table? It's a table only from the intelligence, from the intellectual perspective. As a human being with a neshama and with a ability to appreciate value at a higher level than function, than action. Value that represents a human quality. To him, this is a table. It's not bhitlabshus in the aspect of a table. It is representing the table from a higher perspective, from an inception, from a so to speak, from a truth perspective. This is perhaps a means for us to understand these last two lines. It's an oir, but it's a oir makif.
So